they have a bunch of needs. I mean, it's like we're acting like some people are acting like, oh, well, they only had one need and it was their run D. No, what are you talking about? They only had one need. Their special teams is a circus. Their pass rush is mid-pack at best, as far as sacks, pressure rate, all that kind of stuff. And their run D is also not great, but the O-line's not great. The wide receiver speed's not great. The experience at free safety is not great. The linebacker depth is not great. I mean, they have several things that aren't great, but they obviously chose run defense, and it makes sense because you look at the teams on their schedule in the second half. There's a lot of good running teams. On Khalil Davis I'm not going to pretend that Khalil Davis is a good player. This is his 6th NFL team.
Right. He's a 28-year-old. He's a 28-year-old bounce around guy who adds more to the concept of depth than he does to the concept of making game-changing plays. But he's not a bad player. He's got a low center of gravity. He's going to be hard to move. Maybe his experience playing with Malik Collins will pay off in some way. Maybe Chris Kasurik will put his hands on him and he will morph into a better brand of player than we've really seen out of him. I'm not here to tell you what he isn't, but it isn't much of a resume, and he's certainly not much of a game-wrecking player at all. So,
I mean, he doesn't have good length, he doesn't have good size, doesn't have long arms, kind of short arms. But what he does have is he's always had great strength, right? And good motor. I mean, 32 reps of 225, so he's very, very strong. He's a former shot put and discus thrower at Nebraska. And he plays low. He's quick. He plays hard. As I said, the motor revs high. He's pretty polished, pretty disruptive, pretty agile, pretty quick, nice closing burst. But what he doesn't have is he doesn't anchor against the run. So oh, well, they needed run help, so they added Khalil Davis. Well, he doesn't really anchor against the run. You can move him against the run. If you look at his film, he's played 172 snaps this year. He's got 5 tackles, 8 pressures, 4 run stops. He's just a guy, but he's a guy that can play in a rotation. So it gives him another NFL caliber rotation player. He's been playing, so he played the last 3 weeks. So it's not like a guy that, hasn't been playing. That's this time of year. You got to figure out who's actually in shape, who's been playing and can play right away. So yeah, I looked at the defensive end spot as the more pressing need because they really only have Bosa and Floyd. And after that, it's like, well, what's Yatir Gross-Matos going to give you? Well, I don't know. He's hurt. And what's Beal going to give you? I don't know. He's raw. He's young. Sam Aquinu's been okay. But at tackle, they have Malik Collins, Jordan Elliott, now Khalil Davis. They've got Kevin Givens. They also have Kalia Davis, and they have Evan Anderson. I get the feeling, Damon, that maybe they felt like Kalia Davis is hurt a lot. And he's not hurt right now, but he's hurt a lot. So, he's a durability concern. And then Givens right now is out with the groin. So technically the only, if Kalia Davis is hurt and Givens' groin isn't ready to roll, then your third tackle becomes Evan Anderson, the rookie. And I just don't think they wanted to put that on him. So I just think they wanted to have one more body there. And Khalil Davis, as I said, can play in a rotation. Is he a world beater? No, but he should help them a little bit in a rotation.
Tayshaun Gibson, if they really thought that he was a player that they needed, they wouldn't have let him go. But now he's back. That's not a bad thing, given the issues in the secondary and in the safety play. It's another guy to have back there. Another guy who, isn't an inexperienced rookie playing maybe out of position. We'll see. But, what do you really think, Larry, the 49ers trade deadline tells us about them and how they see themselves? They could have gone after Darius Smith, right? That would have been a bigger move. They decided not to. Wasn't exactly a huge package that delivered him to Detroit. Felt like other teams who are already better positioned than the Niners were more aggressive than the Niners, who need to, make up a couple laps to get back on the lead lap here. What do you think John Lynch is telling us about what he thinks of his team through a lack of a really interest-generating trade deadline?
I don't think they have any more money to spend. I think that's all earmarked for Brock's contract. They know they're going to have
That's
to.
what I'm glad you said it. That's what I think's going on more than anything. They're
Yeah, they have
down the
no
road
money.
planning.
They have no money to spend, and they don't want to give away any draft choices because they know they're going to need all their draft choices. I mean, they're going to need. I mean, they're going to have to say goodbye. I looked at the list. I mean, we could call it up right here. The Niners list of unrestricted free agents: Aaron Banks, Mooney Ward, Demo Lenore, just to start right there. And they might not be able to sign any of them. They might have to say goodbye to all these guys. So they might have to kiss off Banks, and they may have to say goodbye to their starting corners. And so I mean that they're in a tough situation financially. So I don't think they want to spend any more money. And then I don't think that no contract in the NFL will go up more than Brock Purdy's goes up from this year to next year. And so they have to accommodate the biggest jump of any individual contract in the sport. And then they also need to retain as many of their draft picks so they can so they can fill out a roster, despite the fact that they're going to have to probably going to have to offload 7 or 8 players and maybe 5 or 6 good players just to accommodate Purdy. So,
yeah,
what if you had to get rid of Lenore and Mooney? Okay, so then you go into this draft and you're like, we need an offensive line, but we need a corner.
It's Lenore, Mooney, and Kittle. I mean, that's the thing. There's going to be a big name who you really like and root for, who's on the team this year, who will not be on this team next year. And that is the price of doing, top tax bracket, paychecks with your starting quarterback. The Niners had an incredible window and opportunity with Brock Purdy on the rookie deal. And unfortunately for them, they did not get it done. And getting it done with Purdy on his next deal is going to be a whole different equation. I mean, the math looks different on all of it. So to take what you think is this year and then say, well, the continuity of this year rolling into next year's roster will look drastically different, I think, than this year's roster. So, let's recap. Where are we going into this Tampa Bay game, right? It was a disjointed and disappointing offseason. It has been a disjointed and disappointing regular season to this point. They're also just a play or two away from having a much better record. And as always, the argument is out there, hey, if that's true, you're a play or two away from having a much worse record. That is also out there and true, but it's like that for everyone. That's just kind of how the heartbeat of the league works. A teeny tiny move at the deadline that adds depth but not really any impact. The injuries that affected the start of this season are now your last point of hope and retreat, as I think a 49er fan, for a dramatic change to happen this year. Guys who were hurt and unavailable at the beginning of the year will hopefully now be unhurt, less hurt, and available in the next game or two and for the remainder of the season. And it feels like that's what the 49ers are really counting on here, Larry. They think that the cavalry is coming from inside their own locker room. And look, with it being CMC and Feliciano and Juwan Jennings and Yatir Gross-Matos and Jake Moody, maybe that does happen. Maybe that does happen. I just know this. They better beat Tampa. Because if a distinct rest advantage and all the time in the world to prep for this team is not enough to get them over that hump and hill, it's going to be really hard to look at the remainder of this, the first 4 games of the second half for the 49ers, with 3 of the 4 games being on the road: Tampa, Green Bay, Buffalo, and then home to Seattle. I mean, everything you're going to need to know about this season, I really do think gets revealed in the next 4 weeks. So it's hold your breath and hope Christian McCaffrey is ready to play the role of Superman. And that's probably an unfair ask, and it's probably an unrealistic expectation. But he's going to have to be remarkable. And really, from here on out, Brock Purdy, Larry, is going to have to be Montana-esque to really say, with great, for everyone to be like, yeah, their Super Bowl window is still totally open, man. They're ready to win another champ. They're ready to win now. For us to go from where we are to thinking yeah, they're legitimate, real Super Bowl contenders. They're going to have to start playing some spectacular football independent of availability. And in order to get that done, they're going to need Brock to just be flipping amazing the rest of the way.